This video is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any health-related decision.
The way you breathe in the first 5 minutes after waking can quietly shape the way you feel for the rest of the day. Before coffee, before conversation, before the mind fully gathers itself, there is a silent opportunity, a chance to lengthen the spine, open the lungs, and remind the body that it is still capable of expansion. Aging does not steal vitality in dramatic leaps. It narrows it gradually, especially through small habits like shallow breathing and restricted movement. And that is why something as simple as a gentle overhead reach paired with deep breathing can become one of the most powerful morning rituals a senior can practice. When we sleep, the body becomes still for hours. Circulation slows, joints settle into one position, and the connective tissues, the fascia that wrap around muscles and organs, subtly tighten. The thoracic spine, which supports the rib cage, tends to round forward. By morning, many people notice stiffness in the shoulders and upper back. This is not weakness, it is biology responding to immobility. The overhead reach directly addresses this natural stiffening. As the arms rise slowly toward the ceiling, the shoulder joints move through flexion. The scapulae glide upward, and the spine begins to elongate segment by segment. This movement is gentle, yet it is neurologically significant. The brain constantly maps the body through sensory feedback. When seniors lift their arms overhead with control, nerve receptors in the muscles and joints send signals back to the brain saying, "We are moving, we are safe, we are capable." That reassurance reduces protective muscle guarding, which is often responsible for chronic tightness. Movement, when slow and deliberate, becomes a message of safety. Now consider the breathing component. With age, breathing patterns often become shallow and chest-dominant. The diaphragm, the dome-shaped muscle beneath the lungs, may not descend fully. This reduces lung expansion and limits oxygen exchange. Deep inhalation during the overhead reach counteracts this pattern. As the arms lift and the chest opens, the rib cage expands outward and upward. The diaphragm contracts and moves downward, creating negative pressure that draws air deeply into the lungs. Oxygen diffuses across the alveoli into the bloodstream more efficiently when breaths are full rather than shallow. This improved oxygenation has systemic effects. Every cell in the body depends on oxygen for energy production within the mitochondria. When breathing is restricted, fatigue often follows. Seniors sometimes interpret low morning energy as an inevitable part of aging, but in many cases it is partly due to insufficient oxygen delivery. A few cycles of deep breathing while stretching can gently elevate alertness without overstimulating the nervous system. Equally important is the influence on the autonomic nervous system. Slow, controlled breathing activates the parasympathetic branch, the system responsible for calm, digestion, and restoration. Overnight stress hormones may rise slightly in preparation for waking. By pairing movement with deliberate inhalation and slow exhalation, the body transitions smoothly from sleep to wakefulness. The heart rate steadies. Blood pressure adjusts gradually. The body awakens without shock. Mechanically, the overhead reach also decompresses the spine. Gravity compresses the vertebral column over time. Intervertebral discs, which act as cushions between the bones, lose some hydration with age. When you lift the arms and imagine gently growing taller, you create axial elongation. This reduces compressive forces momentarily and allows fluid to redistribute within the discs. While this stretch does not reverse aging, it provides daily nourishment to spinal structures that depend on movement for health. There is also a profound psychological dimension to this motion. The posture of reaching upward is inherently expansive. It opposes the protective, inward curved posture that often accompanies pain, fatigue, or emotional withdrawal. When seniors practice lifting their arms with intention, they subtly reinforce a mindset of openness. The body and mind are not separate systems. Posture influences mood through complex neurochemical pathways. An open chest and lifted spine can increase feelings of confidence and engagement. The key is gentleness. The movement should never be forced. Arms rise slowly, perhaps synchronized with a 4-count inhale. At the top there is a brief pause, not a strain, but a moment of awareness. Then the arms lower gradually with a long exhale, allowing the shoulders to relax downward. This cycle can be repeated 5 to 8 times. Each repetition becomes smoother as synovial fluid warms within the shoulder joints, reducing friction and enhancing range of motion. For seniors with limited shoulder mobility, the reach can be modified. Hands may rise only to shoulder height. Elbows can remain slightly bent. The principle remains the same: controlled upward motion, combined with diaphragmatic breathing. What matters is not the height of the arms, but the quality of the breath and the sense of length through the spine. Over time, this daily ritual can improve shoulder flexibility, enhance posture, and support respiratory efficiency. But perhaps more importantly, it cultivates awareness. It teaches seniors to notice how their bodies feel each morning, where stiffness resides, where breath feels restricted, where movement flows easily. That awareness becomes preventive medicine. It allows small issues to be addressed before they evolve into chronic limitations. In a world that often equates vitality with speed and intensity, this simple stretch offers a different model of strength. Strength here is not forceful, it is attentive. It is the willingness to begin the day by honoring the mechanics of breathing and the architecture of the spine. The overhead reach is not merely an exercise, it is a declaration that the body, regardless of age, still responds to care, still adapts to gentle stimulus, still unfolds towards space when invited with patience and respect. If you could preserve only one quality of movement as you age, it should be the ability to turn and look behind you without hesitation. Rotation is more than a mechanical action, it is orientation, awareness, and independence. The simple act of turning the spine, something we often take for granted in youth, becomes quietly restricted over time. And yet, the seated spinal twist is one of the most restorative movements a senior can practice in the morning, not because it is dramatic, but because it gently reintroduces the body to its natural design. During sleep, the spine remains largely in one position for hours. The intervertebral discs, those soft, gel-like cushions between the vertebrae, rely on movement for nourishment. Unlike muscles, they do not have a direct blood supply. They receive nutrients through a process called diffusion, which depends on changes in pressure created by movement. When the spine rotates, compresses, and releases, fluids shift in and out of the discs, carrying oxygen and essential nutrients. Without this subtle pumping mechanism, the discs gradually lose hydration and resilience. A seated spinal twist in the morning begins this pumping process in the most controlled way. Sitting upright on a stable chair, feet grounded, the spine tall but relaxed, you gently rotate the torso to one side. The movement should originate not from the shoulders pulling aggressively, but from the rib cage and mid-back initiating the turn. This distinction matters. When rotation is distributed evenly along the thoracic spine, it protects the lower back from strain and encourages balanced mobility. As the body turns, several systems activate simultaneously. Muscles along the spine, particularly the multifidus and other deep stabilizers, engage subtly to control the motion. These muscles are essential for posture and spinal integrity, yet they weaken quickly with inactivity. The twist awakens them without force, reminding them of their supportive role. This gentle engagement contributes to long-term spinal stability and reduces the likelihood of chronic back discomfort. The thoracic spine, located behind the rib cage, is designed for rotation. However, modern lifestyles encourage forward bending rather than turning. Over time, rotational range decreases. When this happens, the body compensates by overusing the cervical spine or lower back, leading to stiffness or discomfort in those regions. A mindful seated twist restores movement where it belongs. It distributes mechanical stress more evenly, which is fundamental for joint preservation. Breathing again plays a crucial role. As you rotate to one side, inhaling slowly, the ribcage expands asymmetrically. One side of the chest opens slightly more, while the other compresses gently. This alternating pattern enhances rib mobility and improves respiratory mechanics. On the exhale, as you deepen the twist just slightly, never forcing, the abdominal muscles assist in stabilizing the movement. This coordinated breath and move rhythm reinforces neuromuscular efficiency. There is also a neurological dimension that deserves attention. The spine houses the spinal cord, the central highway of neural communication between brain and body. When we rotate gently, we stimulate mechanoreceptors in the joints and surrounding tissues. These receptors send signals to the brain that refine coordination and proprioception, our sense of where the body is in space. For seniors, maintaining proprioceptive awareness is critical for balance and fall prevention. The twist, though performed seated, indirectly supports safer movement while standing and walking. Beyond physiology, rotation carries symbolic and psychological weight. To twist is to look around, to check one's surroundings, to remain engaged with the environment. Seniors who lose rotational mobility often become cautious, limiting head and trunk movement. This can subtly reduce confidence in navigating spaces. By practicing a seated twist daily, the body regains familiarity with turning. Confidence grows not through intensity, but through repetition of safe, controlled motion. The twist should be performed slowly, with attention to alignment. The spine remains elongated, not slouched. Imagine the crown of the head rising gently upward as the torso rotates. This axial lift prevents compression in the lower back. The hands may rest lightly on the thigh and the back of the chair for guidance, but they should not pull forcefully. The rotation should feel like wringing out tension gradually, not forcing range. On each side, holding the position for a few breaths allows the connective tissues to adapt. Fascia responds to sustained, gentle stretch by becoming more pliable. Over weeks and months, this can translate into measurable improvements in mobility. The key is consistency rather than intensity. Seniors do not need extreme ranges of motion, they need functional, pain-free movement that supports daily activities like reaching into a back pocket, reversing a car, or turning to greet someone. Importantly, the seated position provides safety. For those with balance concerns, twisting while seated eliminates the risk of falling. It allows full focus on spinal movement without fear. This sense of security encourages relaxation, and relaxed muscles allow greater mobility than tense ones. Over time, this daily rotational ritual can reduce stiffness in the mid-back, support upright posture, and even alleviate some forms of tension-related neck pain. It serves as a reminder that the spine is not a rigid pole but a dynamic column designed to move in multiple planes. Aging may narrow this capacity, but it does not eliminate it. With patient repetition, the body adapts. The discs hydrate more effectively. The stabilizing muscles respond more reliably. The nervous system maintains sharper spatial awareness. In the quiet simplicity of a seated spinal twist lies a profound truth. Mobility is not preserved by avoiding movement, but by engaging it thoughtfully. Rotation keeps the body curious. It keeps the spine responsive. It keeps the individual connected to the space around them. And in that connection, there is both physical resilience and a subtle reaffirmation that the body, even in later decades, still remembers how to turn toward life with steadiness and control. Balance does not begin in the brain, it begins in the feet. Before the body can stand tall, before the eyes can scan the horizon, before confidence can return to a steady walk, the lower legs must quietly perform their duty. The calves and ankles are often overlooked in conversations about aging, yet they function as essential regulators of circulation and stability. A simple calf and ankle stretch in the morning is not merely about flexibility, it is about restoring the body's foundational mechanics after hours of stillness. During sleep, gravity continues to act on the body. Fluids settle in the lower extremities. Muscle activity diminishes, and the pumping action that assists venous blood return slows significantly. Unlike arteries, veins rely heavily on muscular contraction to push blood back toward the heart. The calf muscles, particularly the gastrocnemius and soleus, are sometimes referred to as a peripheral pump because their rhythmic contraction during walking propels blood upward against gravity. When seniors move less frequently, this mechanism becomes less efficient, contributing to swelling, heaviness, or fatigue in the legs. A gentle morning stretch reactivates this system. When you sit upright and slowly flex and extend your ankles, pulling the toes toward you and then pressing them away, you are initiating a mechanical squeeze and release effect in the calf muscles. Even this subtle movement encourages circulation. Blood begins to flow more dynamically, delivering oxygen to tissues that may have felt sluggish upon waking. The lymphatic system, which depends entirely on movement for fluid transport, also benefits. Reduced fluid stagnation can ease mild swelling and create a lighter sensation in the legs. Stretching the calves more deliberately, for example, by placing the ball of the foot against the floor and gently pressing the heel downward, lengthens the Achilles tendon and surrounding muscle fibers. With age, tendons lose elasticity due to changes in collagen structure. They become stiffer and less responsive. This stiffness can limit ankle dorsiflexion, the motion required to lift the front of the foot during walking. Reduced dorsiflexion increases the risk of tripping because the toes may not clear the ground efficiently. By consistently stretching the calves, seniors maintain the functional range necessary for safe gait patterns. Ankle mobility is directly tied to balance. The ankle joint performs continuous micro-adjustments when we stand or walk. These subtle corrections prevent us from tipping forward or backward. If the ankle becomes rigid, the body must compensate through larger movements at the hips or trunk, which are slower and less precise. This delay in correction can increase fall risk. A morning routine that mobilizes the ankles prepares the neuromuscular system for these fine adjustments. It keeps the reflex pathways responsive. There is also a sensory component that deserves attention. The soles of the feet contain numerous nerve endings that provide feedback about pressure, surface texture, and body position. Gentle ankle rotations and stretches stimulate these receptors, sharpening proprioceptive awareness. For seniors, maintaining this sensory acuity is crucial. When the brain accurately perceives foot position, it can coordinate more efficient and confident movement. In this sense, the calf and ankle stretch becomes a dialogue between the ground and the nervous system. The stretch itself should be slow and controlled. One method involves standing behind a chair for support, stepping one foot slightly back, and pressing the rear heel toward the floor while keeping the knees straight. The sensation should be firm but never painful. Breathing remains steady. Holding the position for 20 to 30 seconds allows the muscle fibers to adapt gradually. Switching sides ensures balanced flexibility. For those who prefer seated options, ankle circles performed in both directions can gently mobilize the joint capsule and surrounding ligaments. Over time, consistent stretching influences connective tissue remodeling. Collagen fibers align more efficiently when subjected to gentle tension. This process does not happen overnight, but it occurs predictably with repetition. Seniors often notice improved stride length and reduced stiffness after several weeks of regular practice. Walking becomes smoother. Steps feel more deliberate rather than cautious. The psychological impact is subtle but meaningful. When the lower legs feel strong and responsive, fear of falling diminishes. Fear itself alters posture and movement, often causing stiff, guarded walking patterns that paradoxically increase instability. By maintaining calf flexibility and ankle mobility, seniors cultivate a sense of groundedness. Each step becomes an act of trust rather than hesitation. There is also a metabolic dimension to consider. Muscle tissue plays a role in glucose regulation. Even small movements activate muscle fibers, enhancing glucose uptake from the bloodstream. While a brief morning stretch is not a substitute for broader physical activity, it contributes incrementally to metabolic health. These incremental contributions accumulate over time. The lower legs carry the body's weight day after day, year after year. They absorb impact, adapt to uneven surfaces, and adjust to subtle shifts in balance. Yet they rarely receive focused attention. A dedicated calf and ankle stretch is a form of respect for this labor. It acknowledges that stability is not accidental, it is maintained through deliberate care. As the morning unfolds and weight shifts from bed to floor, these few minutes of targeted movement transform stiffness into readiness. Circulation improves, joint lubrication increases, neural pathways reactivate, the body remembers how to stand not rigidly, but dynamically, supported by ankles that flex, calves that contract efficiently, and feet that sense the world beneath them with clarity and assurance. The shape of your posture quietly tells the story of your habits. Over the years, shoulders drift forward, the upper back rounds, and the chest narrows almost imperceptibly. This is not a flaw, it is an adaptation to hours of sitting, reading, watching, protecting. Yet when the chest collapses inward, something more than appearance changes. Breathing becomes shallow, neck muscles strain, and even mood can subtly dim. A gentle chest, opening stretch in the morning is not about forcing the body into rigidity. It is about restoring space where compression has gradually settled. When seniors wake, the upper body often feels tight across the front of the shoulders. The pectoral muscles, which span from the sternum and collarbone to the upper arm, tend to shorten over time, especially in individuals who spend long periods seated. Shortened chest muscles pull the shoulders forward into internal rotation. This position alters the alignment of the shoulder joint, placing strain on tendons and reducing efficient movement. Over months and years, this pattern can contribute to stiffness, discomfort, and limited overhead mobility. A simple chest opening stretch begins to reverse that pattern. Standing or sitting upright, gently clasping the hands behind the back, or resting them lightly against a doorway frame, the individual slowly draws the shoulders backward while lifting the sternum slightly. The key is not to arch the lower back aggressively, but to lengthen through the upper spine. As the shoulder blades glide toward one another, the anterior chest wall expands. This expansion is mechanical, but its implications are systemic. The rib cage is not a fixed cage. It is a dynamic structure composed of bones, cartilage, and muscle. When posture collapses, the ribs lose some of their mobility. The lungs, which rely on rib movement for full expansion, cannot inflate optimally. Shallow breathing becomes habitual. By opening the chest and encouraging the ribs to move more freely, lung capacity improves. The diaphragm works in coordination with intercostal muscles to create fuller inhalations. Oxygen exchange becomes more efficient, and tissues throughout the body benefit from improved oxygen delivery. There is also a relationship between posture and cervical strain. When the shoulders round forward, the head often shifts slightly ahead of the body's center of gravity. This forward head posture increases the load on the cervical spine. Muscles at the back of the neck must work harder to keep the head upright, leading to tension and fatigue. A chest opening stretch rebalances this alignment. As the shoulders draw back, the head naturally stacks more directly above the spine. Muscular effort decreases, and the sensation of heaviness in the neck may lessen. From a neurological standpoint, posture influences emotional state. The body and brain communicate bidirectionally. Studies in psychophysiology suggest that expansive postures positively affect mood and perceived energy levels. When seniors gently lift the sternum and broaden the collarbones, they are not only stretching tissue, they are altering sensory input to the brain. Mechanoreceptors within muscles and joints signals associated with openness and stability. This can subtly enhance alertness and self-assurance. The stretch must be performed with patience. Sudden or forceful pulling can irritate sensitive shoulder structures. Instead, the movement unfolds gradually. As the shoulders ease back, the breath deepens naturally. A slow inhale fills the chest. A steady exhale allows tension to soften without collapsing the posture. Holding the stretch for 20 to 30 seconds permits the fascia to adapt. Connective tissue responds best to sustained, moderate tension rather than quick, aggressive movements. For seniors with limited shoulder mobility, modifications ensure safety. Hands can rest at the sides, while simply rolling the shoulders backward in a controlled arc. Even this circular motion mobilizes the scapulae and counteracts forward rounding. The intention remains consistent. Create space across the chest and encourage upright alignment. Over time, consistent chest opening influences more than flexibility. It can improve gait efficiency. When the upper body is upright and the arms swing freely at the sides, walking becomes more balanced and coordinated. Arm swing is not incidental. It counterbalances leg movement. A restricted chest can limit this natural rhythm. By restoring shoulder mobility, seniors support smoother locomotion. The psychological dimension deserves equal attention. Rounded posture often accompanies feelings of withdrawal or fatigue. Conversely, standing with an open chest conveys readiness and engagement. For many seniors, maintaining a sense of presence in social settings is vital for well-being. The physical act of opening the chest each morning reinforces a subtle message: I am not shrinking away from the world. Breathing and posture intertwine intimately. When the sternum lifts and the collarbones widen, inhalation becomes less labored. This improved breathing pattern influences heart rate variability, a marker of autonomic nervous system balance. Steadier breathing fosters calm without dullness. It prepares the individual for the day ahead with composed energy rather than agitation. There is dignity in standing upright. Not rigid, not strained, but aligned. The chest opening stretch honors the architecture of the human body, a structure designed not to collapse inward, but to expand. Aging may gently encourage curvature, but it does not eliminate the body's capacity to lengthen and breathe fully. Through deliberate, compassionate movement, seniors can reclaim space across the heart and lungs, easing tension in the shoulders and neck while inviting oxygen, light, and presence back into the upper body with steadiness and quiet confidence. Walk into any room and observe how much of movement begins at the hips. Every step, every shift of weight, every transition from sitting to standing is orchestrated through this central junction of the body. And yet, the hips are among the first areas to stiffen with age, particularly after years of prolonged sitting. The hip flexors, muscles that draw the thigh toward the torso, gradually shorten, subtly tilting the pelvis forward and placing strain on the lower back. A gentle hip flexor and thigh stretch in the morning is not simply about flexibility. It is about restoring alignment, balance, and freedom of motion at the very core of mobility. During sleep, the hips remain in a relatively fixed position. If a person spends much of the day seated, the hip flexors rarely experience full extension. Over time, this sustained shortening alters posture. The pelvis may tilt anteriorly, exaggerating the curve of the lower spine. This increased lumbar lordosis compresses vertebral joints and can contribute to discomfort. Many seniors interpret lower back stiffness as an unavoidable consequence of aging, when in reality it is often a reflection of muscular imbalance. Lengthening the hip flexors begins to correct this imbalance. A simple method involves standing upright while holding a stable surface, stepping one foot slightly backward, and gently shifting the pelvis forward until a stretch is felt of the front of the hip and thigh of the rear leg. The back remains tall, not arched excessively. The movement is subtle. It is not about lunging deeply, but about allowing the muscle fibers to elongate gradually. The sensation should feel steady and controlled, never sharp. The primary muscles engaged in this stretch include the iliopsoas and rectus femoris. The iliopsoas originates along the lumbar spine and pelvis, connecting directly to the upper thigh bone. Because of this anatomical connection, tightness in this muscle can pull on the lower spine, influencing posture and gait. By lengthening it gently, pressure on the lumbar vertebrae may decrease. Seniors often report a feeling of lightness in the lower back after consistent stretching, not because the spine itself has changed dramatically, but because muscular tension has eased. There is also a significant relationship between hip mobility and stride length. When the hip cannot extend fully during walking, steps become shorter and more cautious. Reduced stride length may lead to slower walking speed and increased energy expenditure. Over time, this inefficiency can contribute to fatigue. By improving hip extension through regular stretching, seniors support smoother, more economical movement patterns. Walking becomes less of an effort and more of a natural rhythm. Balance is intricately tied to hip function. The hips house powerful stabilizing muscles that control lateral and forward movement. When hip flexors are excessively tight, they can inhibit optimal activation of the gluteal muscles, which are essential for pelvic stability. This imbalance may compromise balance during single leg stance phases of walking. Stretching the front of the hips restores equilibrium between opposing muscle groups, enhancing overall stability. Breathing once again enhances the effect. As the hips shift forward into the stretch, inhaling deeply encourages length through the torso. Exhaling slowly allows the pelvis to settle without force. The nervous system interprets slow breathing as a signal of safety, permitting muscles to relax more fully. This is particularly important in the hip region, where tension can accumulate due to both physical and emotional stress. Emotionally, the hips often carry a sense of guardedness. Years of caution, physical or psychological, can manifest as subtle rigidity in this area. When seniors approach hip stretching with patience rather than urgency, they cultivate trust in their bodies. The stretch becomes a quiet acknowledgement that stiffness does not define capability. It is a temporary state that responds to consistent care. For individuals with limited balance, the stretch can be performed in a modified half, kneeling position using supportive cushions, or even while lying on the edge of a bed with one leg hanging gently downward. The principle remains unchanged: controlled extension of the hip joint within a comfortable range. Consistency matters more than intensity. Physiologically, stretching influences connective tissue remodeling. Collagen fibers within tendons and fascia respond to sustained tension by gradually reorganizing, improving elasticity over time. While this adaptation is gradual, it is measurable. Even modest gains in hip flexibility can reduce mechanical stress on adjacent joints such as the knees and lower back. The hips serve as the bridge between upper and lower body. When they move efficiently, energy transfers smoothly through the kinetic chain. When they stiffen, compensations emerge elsewhere. A morning hip flexor stretch is therefore preventive in nature. It preserves functional alignment before discomfort escalates into chronic limitation. As seniors step forward into their day, the sensation of released tension at the front of the hips translates into a more upright stance and a more confident gait. The pelvis aligns more neutrally. The lower back feels supported rather than compressed. Movement becomes less guarded and more fluid. In these subtle shifts, there is renewed autonomy. A reminder that even small, deliberate stretches performed with awareness can restore balance at the center of the body, where stability and motion quietly converge to support each deliberate step forward.